look that direction, but I promise I'm really talking to all of you over here in this camera. So Tara already did the introductions. The purpose of this session is when you're thinking about more funding. I know several adult ed programs this year took a dip in funding. Some small, some large, some made an increase. It all varies. And so one of the things we heard was, what are we going to do to fill in these gaps of funding? And so one opportunity is when you're looking for more funding, sometimes you have to think outside of the box as to what does that look like. So you may want to ask yourself, what am I doing because what am I not doing because my budget isn't big enough? Or what am I not doing because my current budget doesn't allow it? Because different grants have different allowabilities and requirements. What do my students need me to do more of? What would help my students take that next step, whether it's college, it's employment, it's enrolling in a bridge, it's getting citizenship, whatever that is, what could we do to maybe help with that? And so in looking at those pieces, think about some of those questions, ask yourself some of those questions. And so depending on the answers that you have from some of the opportunities that depending on the answers you get, you may need to identify some funding opportunities to answer those specific questions. There's a lot of different types of grants that are available. To list a few is the Dollar General grant, Secretary of State grant, various ICCB grants. I don't have all of them. I don't know all of them. I wouldn't even try to list all of the possible grant opportunities. But one of them is the Innovative Bridge and Transitions Grant. You heard about IBT grant multiple times this morning in that opening session. It has a pretty broad scope of possibilities for what programs can do using that grant. The next round of applications is closed right now, but maybe think about if this could be something you could fit for your program or not. And if so, maybe next year, and then start planning now. What does this look like? What could we do? How could I maybe make this an opportunity that we use? Today, we're going to hear about 3 different IBT grantees and how they spent or are spending their money right now to fill in some of the financial gaps of their programs. Again, they're not necessarily spending money because adult ed did not allow it, the activities. It could have been that their budget was just small enough that they had to figure out another way to make these things happen. So the first one is Heartland Human Care Services. And unfortunately, I did not do my due diligence and planning because they are not able to join us today because they're currently presenting on another Zoom link as part of the Transitions Academy for something else, the other part of the work that they do. So they were nice enough. Amy Schneider with Heartland Human Care Services was nice enough to share with me how they got creative using IBT funds. And for this particular group, they did a job fair. And so for the job fair, some information, they had their college and career pathway team collaborate with their employment team to host their first career fair that they've done on June 14th. They had 11 employers and 38 participants. For those of you that are not aware, Heartland Human Care Services is a community-based organization outside of Chicago, but in that general northeastern corner of the state. It is not the same thing as Heartland Community College. They are 2 different entities, just to be clear on that one. They also had participants that included students from their classes, individuals that worked with refugee employment from a different part of their Heartland Human Care Services organization. They had some neighborhood walk-ins, they had referrals. So the 38 participants that they had were a variety of students and came from a variety of locations. They provided transportation for some of the students, for the participants who lived further away from their Belmont-Cragen location. Not super familiar with where that location is exactly, but they provided transportation to get the students there. That's a benefit. They were invited to the event early if they wanted to come to get some one-on-one resume development support. So then they were ready to walk out and talk to the employers and say, here's my resume. What does this look like? They were also then able to put together a brief presentation. They had some guided practice around how do you shine at a job fair. So it wasn't just, here's the job fair, show up, good luck. It was also that prep work for the participants that went into it. How are you ready to go? What are you able to do with this? The employer partners participated in an employer hour that included them sharing information about the employment journey for new arrivals in the United States. A testimonial from one participant that was there occurred, and then there were also small group discussions. So it wasn't just the employers sitting at a table. They were also there able to put their other pieces into play and support the students. The employers represented a range of pathways, including food service and hospitality, transportation and logistics, social services, telecommunication, healthcare. So out of 11 employers, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 areas listed. So, I mean, you can do the math on that's averaging 2 each, but maybe there was only 1 for one, but 3 in others. So they had a variety of employers there. So the question is, how did the IBT grant funds help with this? And what they stated was that it allowed them to partially fund their partnership developer role. So it wasn't entirely within the grant, but it was partially within the grant. And that partnership development person is the one that led the charge on this entire process. They're the ones that recruited employers. They set up the schedule. They held the planning meetings. So without that additional support from the IBT grant, they wouldn't have been able to have that staff member be able to focus on getting all of these pieces together that then they can now report out in the IBT grant as all of their measurables and their achievements and what they were able to do. And they didn't Amy didn't state that the other portion of this came from adult ed, but it's possible that it came from adult ed or maybe their employer side because of the way their CBO is set up. But it was one more piece that allowed them to pull in and finalize and give this person dedicated time to work on all of this so it could be a success for the students in the program. I would love to answer questions. I don't have answers to those questions, I'm certain. But if you're interested, put them in the chat. I can reach out to you. I can give you Amy Schneider's email at Heartland Human Care Services. She'd be happy to answer questions and talk you through any of it. She was kind of sad that she couldn't be in 2 places at once because she wanted to be able here and able to talk about all this. But, you know, we can't do that. And so it's fine. We don't have that much money in the IBT grant to duplicate people. So from here, I'm going to turn it over to Mary Beth and Patty at Lincoln Land and let them talk through what they were able to do with their IBT grant funds.
Thank you, Angela. So yes, I'm Mary Beth Hendrick. I'm from Lincoln Land Community College. I'm the transitions coordinator here. Also, we have Patty Mendoza, and she is the director. And so today what we're going to talk to you about is how we use some of our IBT funds. And really what we did is we focus on marketing. Now, how we really started this was we needed to start a conversation. And the nice thing is that that doesn't really have to cost you anything. So we really wanted to focus on building our relationships here at Lincoln Land. So first starting with our marketing department, sitting down and just giving them all the pieces to what we do here in the adult education office. And so that took several different meetings and just kind of talking about our vision of how we wanted to share our program with the students and the community. And then next, we looked at what ICAPS and Bridges we wanted. And then we started meeting with the departments and having that conversation on, okay, how can we demonstrate this towards the students coming in for them, for students coming into us? What is it? How can we paint this picture that this ICAPS is going to be very beneficial for them? And so what we came up with is PRM decided to have a focus group. So it involved staff in our office, it involved students, ESL students, it involved different folks from different areas on our campus. So we just all came together and talked about, how do the students really feel and how do we want to help? How do we want to help them feel more a part of the college, because the message was they didn't feel a part of Lincoln Land. They just felt separate. And we wanted to work on, let's integrate them. Let's share this vision that they are Lincoln Land. And so that was a really big piece to starting on these marketing materials. And lastly, we do have a magazine from Lincoln Land. It's the Forward magazine, where we had different articles and such in there. And you'll see those here shortly. But it really lays out nicely. It really lays everything out nicely to what maybe an ICAPS is. So yeah, next slide. Um, so after having a conversation with our marketing department, having our focus group, again, we wanted to kind of rebrand and show that we are Lincoln Land. We're not separate. And so what do you have to do? You have to create kind of from scratch. You need completely new materials. So what we've been using our funding for is we're actually working on a new banner. We don't have that yet, but we do have these really nice business cards, and you'll see examples of that. And then looking at flyers that just, they needed a new look. They needed to be updated. But with marketing, that involves a lot of different pieces and detail to how we can make this a little more welcoming, a little more appealing. And so there are different things that we looked at. So for example, for a flyer, I mean, how many times have you gotten a flyer and just folded it up and just stashed it away, never to see it again until you absolutely need it? Well, we created these half sheets, and it has a QR code. We have a text number on it. And we also wanted our material to just really spell out the supports that we have for our students. Next slide. Okay, so this is an example of one of our ICAPS programs in the Forward magazine. And so what was really great about our marketing department is that they took time out one day and they went over and they got to know the students, they got to know the instructor. They really took time to talk to us and understand, what is an ICAPS? What is this program? What are we trying to help communicate to our community and to our students and to everyone here? And so I really feel like that they just really painted this vision very, very well. And these students were in our CNA ICAPS last semester, and they were actually our top 4 students. So it was a very proud moment for us in the CNA program, and we're very proud of them. But it was just another way to kind of communicate, again, our vision and what an ICAPS is. It's still something that we continue to kind of work on educating our community college about. Next slide. And then this is October. This is this past October. Again, just really painting, what is adult education? What do we have to offer? Being able to share the students' successes, the students' stories, and just inviting them to take their first step with us. Next slide. And so these are some examples of what we have created. Let me just get some water. So with this first one, we have a student that we're very, very proud of. He actually got Student of the Year last year, but he's been through our program, ESL program. He's gone to construction program here. He's just a really big advocate for us. And he's always coming in and asking how we are, and he's always bringing us people. So we wanted to share more of his story and what he had to say. So being able to capture a student's experience really, I believe, helps our flyers. So, and again, it does lay out, like, these are our offerings. This is what we have to fuel your ambition, to really speak to the students and say, you can do this with us by you. And the next thing we did is we created these little business cards. And on the back, which unfortunately, I did not scan the back, but it has a list of our services as well as a number to text, because anymore it's really hard to get in touch with students by phone. So if you have the ability, we have something that we use called Mongoose. If you have that ability, share that text number because it really does work. It's really helped us out tremendously getting our students and communicating with them. And lastly, like I said, we really wanted something to show them, this is what we have for you. This is how we can help you if, um, you know, maybe you're having a mental health crisis, or maybe that you need a bus pass, or you are having trouble attending classes. Is there another option? Is there a way we can work with you? So we tried to really lay that out for our students in our new materials. Next slide. And then these are our ICAPS. I know I keep saying flyers, our half sheet flyers. But so we have a few different ICAPS going on. We have our digital marketing, CNA, and auto. So, and an example of how we really got together about our messaging was we met with the automotive department and we talked about what can we call this? I don't know if they're going to get ICAPS because it's still a hard thing to communicate to students sometimes. So really trying to nail down that messaging is helpful, especially when you're working together, collaborating. And we talked about, well, we're working on their skills. Let's call it skill building. So our ICAPS is really tailored to building those skills, not only with their literacy levels, but their workplace um, and all of the above. So and as you can see, we do have QR codes on here as well. So it will always link back to the website so that they can get the information about what classes are available, when is this being offered. And again, having that text number is always helpful. But this is how we really just started to kind of paint our ICAPS. For our bridges, we are still working on exactly what that will look like. But I think it's been very helpful for our students to really understand what we're trying to do. Next slide. And really those are the materials that we've used our grant money. We've been able to just really think about our messaging and how we can present this to our college and our students. And that's what I have for you today. Kind of short and sweet, but does anyone have any questions?
I'll add a couple of things, Mary Beth.
Sure.
Just these flyers are also utilized for teaching even our internal partners, external partners, because many of them don't know that what ICAPS really is. So we do go to many interagency meetings across our district here, which we do have a pretty large geographic area that we do serve. So we do take these out and about, and we have had those phone calls from other agencies as well as their participants that are wanting to potentially join our adult ed and all that. One of the other things that we did was so Lawrence Education, which was another GED provider here in this area, did not continue offering that. So we are now the only provider in the area. So our PRM, which is our public relations and marketing department, they put together flyers so that we could have those for these new students that are coming into us. So a lot of flyers, a lot of travel that we used, just pretty much like Mary Beth said, just making sure people understand what we're doing and what our message is. So.
Thank you, ladies. And again, it's just a different way of filling in the gap of what you don't have in the original budget. How can you help do some of this? All right, on to Oakton.
All right, thank you so much, Angela. So I am here with my colleagues Eitri and Laura, who are our two full-time transitions coordinators at Oakton College. I am Tiffany. I am the manager of adult education and transition. So I oversee our high school equivalency program as well as our bridge, ICAPS, and varying transitions programs. And so, and you can hit to the next little ditty here. So we're going to talk about our adult ed resources and referrals guide. And first I want to talk about how we were even able to do this. And that was through the Innovative Bridge and Transition Grant. What's important is to have additional people on the table when applying for other grants outside of our normal adult ed ones, especially those on the front lines of student support. And so I wanted to make sure that our transitions coordinators had a say in what we needed additional funding for. As many programs saw an uptick in ESL populations, we're at over 2,000 ESL students within our adult ed program. We knew that there were support pieces and resources that we needed to find to provide to those students or to the teachers who were working with those students. And so with that, we were able to fund one full-time transitions coordinator to dedicate their time to come up with this resources and referrals guide for everybody to have access to. And then we were able to continue with our other full-time transitions coordinator position through the adult ed funding. But there's no way we could do two full-timers just through adult ed funding, and we need them. So I'm going to pass it on to Laura, who was really the kind of pioneer in getting this guide going.
So the why of all of this, basically it came up because when I started my role at Oakton, I was working a lot with individual students one-on-one, sharing their stories and their needs for support. And it was born out of the student need that was constantly coming up. And there wasn't a comprehensive guide for support services and referrals, both at the college and in the community. So it was pretty time consuming. We want to make sure that we emphasize how time consuming putting together a resources and referrals guide can be. But we do believe that the investment on the front end really does pay off in the long term versus trying to find, resources when students express need. So I just started compiling them, and we'll show you what that looks like in Google Drive because we chose to use a Google Drive platform to house all of this. But the resources that I chose, and I'm still adding, we're all still adding as a team to this, were based on personal and professional involvement with my communities. I'm a person that is very, very, very dug into both personal and professional communities here in the Chicagoland area. So these referrals kind of come to me from all aspects of my life, and I figure we just funnel those all into one place. Also try to focus on local and intentional news consumption because a lot of resources can be found within those. In the Chicagoland area, I know we're not all in Chicago, but in the Chicagoland area, I'm a big user of Block Club Chicago. It's a really great resource for the various neighborhoods in the city. Based on where you live, I would encourage you to start consuming more of that news if you're interested in compiling something like this. As a kind of baseline, I try to think if it helps myself or people in my communities, then it will most likely definitely help our student population. So I try to kind of remove the barrier between personal and professional life that way when it comes to resources and referrals and just items that can help our student population. We do email blasts every so often. I would say twice or three times quarterly for urgent and or time-sensitive resources, especially when it comes to weather-related things like warming and cooling centers. We're very lucky in the Chicagoland area that the city of Chicago releases guides that are in 6 or 7 different languages regarding these warming and cooling centers. So they're really easy PDF files to download and disseminate to the student population in several languages. And in order to do that, to get these email blasts out, I work closely with our data team to get the most up-to-date student contact list, since with a program of our size, it's kind of always changing. So we want to make sure that we have everybody that we can grab before we send out these emails.
All right, so on this slide, what we wanted to show here were the categories that we ended up getting all of these resources into. So on Google Workspace, we've started a folder which is called the Adult Ed Resources and Referrals Guide. And at one point in the beginning, it was just flyers and lists of all these different wraparound services available. And we now then when we were awarded the IBT grant, we knew we could dedicate that heavy time-consuming task of making sure we're getting comprehensive services, whether they be within internally within Oakton or externally through community based organizations, etc. And so these are the categories that we have within the guide. So anywhere from access and disability resources to weather related, as Laura mentioned. We have a really big one under immigration, refugee, and asylees. And so on that next slide, if you'd like to move forward, these are just some of many, many more flyers that are within that particular folder. And so the idea here is that this entire drive can be shared using one link, and anybody with that link can view anything within the drive. So they won't have access to add, change, or delete anything unless they're within just our little team here. But we want staff and teachers and students to all have access to whatever they may need. And so it's kind of like this, we invite everybody to, hey, if something comes along, share it with one of us. We'll make sure it gets into the guide. But it's really just been so helpful for each of us, Eitri, Laura, and I, as we are working with our students. And you all know the diverse populations and needs that we're serving. I mean, anything from, we have people who don't have coats for their children this winter, and we know exactly how we can help them, or their teacher knows exactly where to go to get that information for them. And so it's just been really great to, well, as Laura mentioned, spending that time and commitment to get this off the ground and rolling. But now we're able to maintain it as we're nearing the end of the IBT grant in this last quarter here. We're really excited to have such a robust foundation here, and that we can share out with, I mean, there's even been interdepartmental people within Oakton that have been like, hey, we have a student who needs this. Do you guys know anything? And we're like, oh, do we? And so it's time well spent. We couldn't do it without being able to pay the salary through the IBT grant. So it's super encouraged. It's probably my favorite grant outside of adult ed, because it really does serve just such general purposes that are all, so valuable. And then we encourage you guys to also think about doing something like this. And Laura will go to that next slide and speak about that.
So can I jump in really quick? Sorry.
Yeah.
So Tiffany, you mentioned when we were talking the other day about some of this, that you even have had teachers use some of the resources out of this. So
Yeah.
yes, the original intention was for students, and that's what's written in the IBT grant. Good for you. But the reality is, sometimes, like you said, or Laura, I think, said, if you need these resources, there's a good chance our students need them. And so you're able to use this. It's not limited to only students.
Exactly. No, exactly. We have had teachers that I know have gone specifically to Laura about their own needs. I know that we all, whether we're working as teachers in addition to full-time work or part-time work within adult education, we sometimes lack support, and so our teachers are looking for something, and it can be a variety of things, but we want to be able to serve them as well. So yeah, it's totally a dual purpose, Angela. Absolutely.
We would love for y'all to consider replicating something like this. As you can see, we use Google Workspace because that's the platform that we use at Oakton. We've found it really beneficial since it just lives where a lot of our other documents live. And so it's easier to work with, we think, what your institution already uses, because you can be quick linking and doing all of these things without having to remember where something lives if it's all living in the same place. You could easily replicate this with Microsoft Teams. You could use your personal sandbox or personal course within a learning management system. I'm most familiar with D2L or Brightspace in that way, since that's what we use at Oakton. And you could, if you have a section on your learning management system that you kind of add to and revise and make sure everything's still up to date. That's something we spend a lot of time doing, making sure that the referrals and resources that we're about to send to somebody are still active, because when they're community-based, sometimes they start and they stop, and so anyway, having it on your learning management system, you can upload or introduce a module about resources into all of your courses. So you're not constantly reinventing the wheel. It lives somewhere in your LMS and you can add those modules to all of your courses. Consider having a website at your institution with these resources or with quick links by category. You could do it old school and organize files and resources in a filing cabinet. I inherited something kind of sort of like that and had to go through it as I was making this resource guide. And I found that a lot of the resources that were on paper weren't alive anymore. So had to kind of replace them with more up-to-date things, which is why we kind of like this online resource and referral guide, because it's a more of a living document that we can easily edit and swap out resources. You could also store something on a flash drive, whether it's information from an online resource and referral guide like this, or just flyers, digital copies of flyers, and then you could, use that flash drive wherever you go, or copy it onto several flash drives and hand them out. Tiffany, I'm going back to you.
Thank you, Laura. So we are happy to help you guys, develop this for your program, or if you have any questions now, or you think of something after this, our names and email addresses are up here. So please feel free. And I think Eitri put our email addresses in the chat as well. And we have plenty of time left. So even with that horrible tech glitch issue, we still have plenty of time for questions, friends. So if anybody has any questions, we'd be happy to help and answer those.
You should be able to unmute if you've got questions. I mean, you can raise your hands, you can type it in the chat, whatever you're comfortable with, but you should be able to unmute and ask questions if you want. Maggie Wolf said it was really cool. And Maggie, that's why I wanted them to present. I was like, this is something that's super cool idea that I think a lot of programs kind of wish they had already somehow established. And they probably, like to Laura's point, they probably have something. It may not be that paper file cabinet, but it might be. It could be a bulletin board in the hallway that people are randomly sticking things on. So it could take a variety of forms, but that's why we wanted to share this out.
Oh, hi. I have a comment.
Sure.
I think it was Oakton or previous presenter that talked about the news, local consumable news. You mentioned, what was the name of the website? Block News Chicago?
Block Club Chicago.
Block Club Chicago. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, it's so what's really great about it, I know I recognize you, so I know you're a Chicago person too. It's organized by neighborhood, which is awesome. So it's not just they have a front page feed that is citywide news, but they also have neighborhood specific. As we know, we have tons of neighborhoods in Chicago. And so a lot of those resources that you can pull from that news source are targeted to actual geographic and then the communities that reside within them, which is why I find it so helpful.
Awesome. Thank you.
So there's a question in chat to the Oakton people. Do you receive college fiscal support?
So we receive, no, the simple answer is no. Whatever is required through grants that they need to, so rather, the part of benefits, things like that. But as a program, we are struggling to get that fiscal support from the institution itself. Well, and I think what's like super important about this, and it might vary depending on the program, is that our students are struggling to succeed because they don't know what supports are even out there for them. And so kind of within this guide, it's also just this whole transitions model that we've worked on to implement within Oakton. And so Eitri and Laura do information sessions. And so they're able to connect with students and learn more about where is there a need and what's going on. But students don't know what they don't know. So if we're not, so if one student requests something or seems to be having some sort of a struggle, they might not even know that there's a support service for that, right? I mean, even just school supplies, they have no idea that that's something that we might be able to provide to them. They don't realize that is support that they need to succeed. And so it's just such a wide variety of services and resources that our students could take advantage of. And so it's really important for us to be able to share that out to them so that they know. And it's great because if there isn't something within our guide, they teach us that we need to get more, you know. So it's an opportunity for us to learn too more about what they're missing or what those gaps are for them.
So there was a question that came into the chat that asked if there are other grants available out there. Yes, there are grants, different places, different locations, different opportunities. I don't have an easy go here to find where they're all listed. As I mentioned earlier, I know the Secretary of State offers some grants around some of the work that Adult Ed, could partner with. The Dollar General does a grant. I am not super familiar with what that one is. I just know it's another grant. I've heard a lot of Adult Ed programs reference. And then ICCB just has grants from time to time that are available. Sometimes it's related to what's in legislation. Sometimes it depends on what's come from the federal level. There's a variety of reasons that we're able to provide different types of grants. Those are typically shared out or they're on our website, which I will drop the link in the chat for that website. And all I can do is tell you to check back on that website from time to time, and you'll just have to read through the details to see if it is something that you would be eligible for or not, because some of our grants are specifically for adult ed, some of them are specifically for a CTE program, some of them are specifically in healthcare or IT, and so it just depends on what you're looking for, what grants, but that's true of all grants. You just got to look at them and see what's available and what's where. There was another question that came in to me that's really for Oakton. How do you split up work within your department of transitions, of GED and ICAPS, student support? What does that look like? How can you describe some of that for us?
I can start off and then Lauren Eitri can chime in. So we're recently doing a little bit of a shift in the roles of the transitions coordinators because we have such a high need at our Des Plaines campus, which is Oakton's main campus, with ESL support, that Eitri's position is now kind of hybrid to each of our campuses, and he's dedicated just to ESL on Tuesdays and Thursdays in Des Plaines. But we also have a transitions Google form for students that are interested in speaking with anybody from the transitions team about what their next steps are, what their goals are, what programs are out there, ICAPS, bridge programs, etc. So Laura and Eitri kind of go off and on. When one comes in, that's who they, kind of switches back and forth and who takes what. There's also an ICAPS form within Oakton's website. And so students can express interest on that form. And then again, those students are put on that specific wait list regarding that particular ICAPS pathway. And then when there's information, Laura and or Eitri reach out to them as well. So there's not like necessarily like a really great formula for what I'm describing. I'm really, really lucky to have both Laura and Eitri as full-time transitions coordinators under me. I can't imagine doing this work and our students being able to have the success that they're reaching without this team. It just wouldn't be possible. And so I hope that we can continue getting the funding to do it because it is working. Laura or Eitri, if you want to unmute and share as well.
I think one thing to add too is how we divide up work also has to do with our individual strengths and backgrounds. So I come from working in nonprofit community organizations in Chicago and teaching for quite a while at city colleges. So I have my hands in those pots. I also speak Spanish, so I coordinate our Spanish GED program. So we kind of play to our strengths a little bit in terms of who jumps on what. We're all pretty actively involved in everything now. And I say that in a good way, but also like we're all running around all the time doing everything. So the division of work also has to do with the fact that the three of us are in literal constant communication. If we were not in constant communication, I think that division of labor and also, you know, eliminating redundant like communications to students and other organizations, we make sure that we're always checking in with each other. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you guys said it, but that's what I wanted to reiterate too. We've been in this field for a long time, and the key sometimes is cross training, knowing what does ESL contains of, what is literacy, what is the GED, what are their prospective exams that our students take, where do they come from? So it takes a little bit of time, as some of you stated too. It's not something that happens overnight. And then once you do know that, then as Laura stated, like knowing the strengths and the weaknesses, as we all have them, and we play a lot of tag every day. We stay in touch constantly through our chat. I think that's the best way to help the best way the students is to if we have any questions, we are constantly collaborating to make the right decision, sometimes hour by hour throughout the day, to make sure that whatever tasks we're doing that time, is that we're making the right decision for the students. And yes, we try to take off the load depending on what is someone doing every day, knowing, we use a lot of technology. We try to be very specific in our calendar. Instead of blocking a spot or saying busy, putting information there. So if anyone has to jump in, we know what the other person is helping with. And I think that helps as time goes by, and being upfront, communicating with the students, knowing who we are and how they can get help. Our students know that they can come to campus at any time throughout the week at any of the two campuses, and receive answers, quality answers from any of us. So that those are some of the key components. Yeah.
And one more question that came through the chat. Do you all partner with mental health service providers for students who are returning back to the educational space?
So we don't have a direct service or provider that we work with. So if they're an Oakton student and they're actively enrolled in our classes, our students do have access to free counseling 12 times per year. And so we do encourage students and promote that. And then within our health services folder in our guide, there's mental health services and resources within there. One thing that we recognize is that those categories there's an assumption where people might think mental health should be its own category, but we put it under health services. So we also do like a shortcut where we will link something from one folder in another folder, just to make sure that we're kind of covering all the bases. Because if somebody looks up LGBTQ plus folder and is expecting maybe some mental health resources in there, we want to make sure that is in there. It's home, if you will, is within our just the overarching health services folder, but we know that mental health services are needed in a variety of the category folders, and so we make sure that we have those in there as well. Somebody had asked in the chat about what we're paying for IBT. So IBT is paying the salary of one transitions coordinator, and then regular adult ed funding is paying for the other one.
So I have a question for Mary Beth at Lincoln Land. So one thing, when I was talking with you all earlier in the week, you mentioned this today, that your PRM helped build some of your documents and put things together and was key in all of that. But you also said you had to educate them on what adult ed is and how some things may need to look a little different from what they typically do. Can you speak to that a little bit more? How did you actually educate them?
Well, I mean, we sat down and just talked about all our programming, and we talked about, what are words to describe what we do? What is it specifically that we are doing? Because they're on the end where they're getting the information from us and then creating a flyer or a document or creating something. So it was just really about bridging the gap. It was bringing their questions and our questions well, how can we make this, clear? And I think what really helped too was bringing in the students, because the students can paint that picture more for PRM to help them understand, like, what is it that they're actually getting. So it is a constant going back and forth and communicating and really just being open to the process of it, really. So you just have to, they would create something, say, but we would go back and be like, well, no, not really. You have to have some honest communication and say, this isn't what we're trying to paint. So, but just having those conversations, I mean, and just continuing it, because I mean, even for our website, that's a continuous conversation too. So, yeah. Hopefully that helps answer your question.
Yeah. Well, and really the point is you got to have those conversations.
Yeah.
Because while you fully understand adult ed, your expertise is not in marketing. Theirs is in marketing, but they don't understand what they're marketing.
Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly.
you have to have those honest conversations. In the same way with Oakton with the students, you have to have those honest conversations about, okay, this is a resource, but you don't qualify for it because you're, too old, too young, whatever makes you much money, whatever the result is, and you have to have some of those honest conversations. But we can find you a different resource that does fit what you need.
Yeah.
So,
well, and I will say we are pretty fortunate with our relationship with our marketing department. I know it's not like that everywhere. But I mean, Lincoln Land really does back us, and they're really trying to help get the word out and collaborate and just give the students every chance to succeed.
good. Okay, we have 5 more minutes. Anybody have? See, and now we've got presenters talking to presenters going, oh, I want to share your stuff. I want to take a look. Any other questions? All right.
There are some new ICAPS marketing materials on the ICAPS toolkit on the ICAPS website. So if you also want to check some of that out, and as I see them, become available, if you'd like to share, please, email those to me and I can get that taken care of. Thank you very much to our presenters for sharing today. And thank you to all of the attendees for joining us for the 2024 Transitions Academy Fall Convening. Please remember that all the sessions will be recorded and available for future viewing on our Transitions Academy website. And I'll post that one more time in the chat here. And I also wanted to remind everyone that I know it's on the schedule, but right now we are adjourning for lunch. And then from 12:15 to 1:15, we have a jam-packed general session. So I hope to see you all there. Are there any last-minute questions or comments?
Thank you to all of the colleges that were willing to share their information. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Angela. See you all soon.